we're not treating eating or food as the problem, because it's not. We're looking at what is the root cause, because eating and food is the symptom of a deeper problem.
Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in.
Hi, my friend. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you pressed play, because today we're talking about what to eat when you finally stop dieting and restricting. And this question was inspired by one of our FFA 2.0 members. So we just kicked things off, I think 2 weeks ago, and it's just been so fun and so inspiring to see the amazing women we have inside this program, and already the sense of community that they've formed. It's just like, I love the creation of this program. I am deep in it still. So right now I'm really working through the module on how to regulate your emotions so that you don't feel like they have control over you and that you automatically feel this pull towards food when you feel stressed or overwhelmed or anxious. What we're really doing inside the program is we're not treating eating or food as the problem, because it's not. We're looking at what is the root cause, because eating and food is the symptom of a deeper problem. And in the same way that can be replaced with doom scrolling or binge watching TV or drinking or smoking or overspending, all of these coping mechanisms that we establish and develop subconsciously in order to mask and hide these things that we don't want to look at. So really, as I'm creating this whole module on emotional regulation, we're looking at how do we nip that root cause in the bud so that it doesn't even feel like an urge when you're stressed and anxious. So that's been really, really fun for me. And I do want to make a little note regarding today's episode. If you listened to last week's episode, it was with my coach, Diana Sophia, all about your subconscious mind. And I talked about how it was going to be released in 2 parts. And part 2 was supposed to come out today. So there's a little mistake within the business. So my podcast editor ended up releasing the entire interview last week. And that's okay, mistakes happen. So you actually got part 1 and part 2 last week. So that's why there's no part 2 this week, is because it accidentally all got released last week. So if you were wondering, what is part 2 of the conversation? You've already listened to it. So if you want to come back to last week's episode and really look at it through a fresh lens, get new perspectives, new insights, I definitely recommend that you do so. Sometimes I listen to the same podcast episode like 5 times and I hear something different. I have a new level of consciousness while I'm listening to it. So just wanted to get that out of the way. If you were eagerly waiting for part 2, you've already listened to it. And so today what we're going to be talking about is this question of, what do you eat when you finally decide dieting? Restricting is obviously not working for me. It's creating more anxiety and it's leading to binge eating or yo-yo weight cycling, losing and gaining the same weight over and over again. And another diet is not going to fix my relationship with food. So this question came from one of our members and I was like, this is such a good question. And so I obviously answered it for our FFA 2.0 members, but I wanted to answer it here as well, because what can happen when you've lived so long by food rules and by labeling food as good or bad. So I'm allowed to eat certain foods. I'm allowed to eat the vegetables, the chicken breasts, the quinoa, whatever that category of food might be for you. And then there's all these other foods that are bad. They're forbidden. It might be sandwiches, bread, pasta, pizza, ice cream, chocolate, cookies, right? Like that might be a huge category. And either you just didn't allow yourself to eat it, or when you did eat it, you feel bad about it. You feel like you're doing something wrong, you feel guilty, and then it leads to this out of control binge. So when you learn about intuitive eating and when you want to experience food freedom, you're working on healing your relationship with food, you realize that restriction does not serve you. And it's actually only making your food obsession and your overeating episodes worse. So we know that we want to stop restricting, but then it's like, how do I do it? Do I just go to the grocery store and buy all of the foods that I never allowed myself to eat and fill up my cart with bread and cookies and ice cream and just like have a free for all? Is it more of a progressive type of thing? Like, what do I do and why does it matter the way that I approach this process of letting go of restriction? So here's what you have to know. Yes, I could tell you, you know what? There's no more restrictions. It's a free-for-all. Go out and eat whatever you want, buy whatever you want. Don't base it on whether it's quote-unquote healthy or unhealthy in your mind. Just like go out and eat what you want and then kind of evaluate from there. And that is what some non-diet professionals or coaches might tell you to do. However, I don't necessarily recommend that. And the reason why I don't recommend that is because looking through a nervous system lens, it can actually throw you back into dieting and restriction. So let me explain this to you. I talked about this in one of the very first trainings that I do inside of FFA 2.0, explaining 3 different zones that you experience in your nervous system in your mind. So the first one is your comfort zone. So this is what you know. This is what is familiar. This is what feels safe for you. So your comfort zone isn't necessarily comfortable in the sense of being pleasant, but it's what you feel safe in. So your comfort zone might be restriction. Your comfort zone might be only eating certain foods. It might also be this compulsive addiction to exercise, over exercising, training every single day, even if you are exhausted or sick or injured. Your comfort zone could also be overworking. It could be not having boundaries with people, saying yes even when you want to say no, right? So it's all of these patterns that we have repeated so many times, and it's our sense of safety. So needless to say, in your comfort zone, not much change happens because you're just repeating the same thing over and over again. And if you're not happy with the life that you have or you want to experience growth, you actually have to step out of your comfort zone because growth happens on the other side of fear. It happens on the other side of discomfort because growth means you're doing something you've never done. You are expanding your life. You are expanding that box that you've created for what you believe is possible. So I hope that this is all making sense so far. So that's the first zone. Then the second zone that you have is your stretch zone. And this is where you are pushing yourself to do things that you maybe normally wouldn't do. You are getting out of that comfort zone. You are really like stretching yourself. You are putting yourself out there and you are working to break certain patterns. So it's normal that when you're in your stretch zone, you are feeling maybe a level of fear, of discomfort. I would say I am in my stretch zone pretty much every single day because in order to grow personally and to grow professionally, then it does require me to get out of my comfort zone. So that's your stretch zone. And this is where like you really want to be because you are expanding yourself. You are doing things you've never done. You are growing, but you are not overloading your nervous system. Because then you have that third zone, which is your panic zone. And this is when you try to do too much at once, where you feel overwhelmed, overstimulated. The fear gets really, really loud. It might feel like you are free falling, like there is no sense of safety. And remember that we crave safety above all else. And if you get into that panic zone, what you risk doing is getting so scared that you retreat back into what feels comfortable for you, which means in the context of food, let's say you stretch yourself too much and you go into that panic zone and you try to bring too much in all at once. Maybe you just say, you know what, free for all, everything comes in. I'm going to buy the ice cream and eat the bread and do all of that. And then maybe you do feel a little bit out of control. You feel completely destabilized. You're not used to this and your nervous system panics. Well, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get pulled right into restriction. You're going to get pulled right into dieting because you're going to have this voice in your mind that says, see, when you try to give yourself food freedom, you just eat everything in sight. You cannot control yourself. You need to restrict. So you gather this false evidence that the reason why you lost control is because there's something wrong with you. Because you have no willpower, you have no self-control, you have to be dieting in order to have this sense of control around food. And that's not the truth. It's just that you tried to go way too quickly. That's like, let's say you meet someone for the first time, and when you meet them right away within 5 minutes, you're like, will you marry me? And then they're like, what the hell? This girl is so weird. And then they walk away, obviously. Does that mean that you are fundamentally wrong and you're never going to find someone? Of course not. It's just that you need to go slower. You need to learn about that person. You need to spend time with that person. You need to put in the time. So this is to really bring a perspective that if this is what you've tried to do in the past, maybe you knew about intuitive eating, you wanted to experience more freedom. So in typical diet mentality, it was like all or nothing. So either I'm dieting or I'm not dieting and I'm eating all of the foods and then I feel out of control. And then you had this belief that you are out of control. That explains why I don't recommend that you just go balls to the wall and bring in all of these foods all at once, and that we actually do it more progressively. We do it more systematically so that we are not overloading and overstimulating our nervous system. We're bringing foods back in that you previously didn't allow yourself to eat, these foods that you would love to be able to eat with peace, with calm, balance, quote unquote, moderation. Don't love that word because it's very much used by diet culture, but you know what I mean. Those foods that you're like, I want to be able to go to the restaurant and order pasta instead of forcing myself to have the salad because that is the quote unquote healthier option on the menu. So here's what I teach my clients, and I actually have an 8-step process that if you're in FFA 2.0, you will have access to this. So it's very straightforward. You've got your roadmap of how to systematically bring these foods back into your life so that you're doing it in a way that feels regulated, that feels intentional, that feels mindful, calm, and peaceful. Because what you're doing then is that, let's say that it starts with, we'll use the example of sandwiches. Maybe if you're anything like I used to be, you're scared of carbs and you maybe buy like the low carb bread, or you eat your sandwiches on a bell pepper, or you just have banned sandwiches altogether because, you know, you don't want to make it some kind of creation with a vegetable as the bun, you know, a lettuce bun. So let's say that you're like, I would love to just be able to eat a good sandwich. And if that's you, I so get it, because sandwiches, I would say, is in my top 3 favorite foods. Like if I'm with some girlfriends and we're about to go out for a lunch date, and this is from a personal experience, this literally happened last week, I will always suggest, let's go get sandwiches. And it's just so much better. I don't know if it's just me, but it's so much better when someone else makes you a sandwich. Like I make sandwiches at home all the time, but when I get a sandwich out and there's like that thick layer of meat and there's pickles in there, oh, you've got me signed up. And then if you put some marinated eggplant or some like spicy peppers, forget about it. I'm signed up forever. So I love sandwiches. I can't believe that I went so long without eating sandwiches, or when I did eat them, I felt bad about it and then felt like I needed to make up for it for the rest of the day. Now I'm just so grateful that I can eat these sandwiches and enjoy them with peace and not worry about calories. And most of the time I don't finish them. I'll have the half and then I'm like, I'm good. I'll bring the other half home. It's very, very, very rare that I ever overeat on them. So let's say that you wanted to bring sandwiches back into your life. So we would start there. There might be other foods that you want to bring back, like pasta and pizza and trying to think of what else. Well, you know what I mean. There's all these other foods that you want to bring into your life. Let's start with one food. So we're going to start with sandwiches. And I also recommend that you don't start with the food that feels the scariest for you. Let's say like the scariest food for you is donuts and you're just starting this process. I wouldn't start there because we don't want to overload our nervous system. We want to do it in a way that's going to have like our own sense of quote unquote safety in it. So let's start with, okay, a sandwich would stretch me. It would definitely bring in some discomfort, but I think that I can start with that. So you want to look at, okay, what would it look like for me to bring sandwiches back into my life? So maybe this week, at lunch, I'm going to make a sandwich. So you start with one specific situation where you can have it. And I recommend that you do it in an environment that is relatively peaceful, distraction-free. Like you might not want to do it when you're going out to dinner with family members that trigger you or that make comments about your weight, because then you're doing it in an unsafe environment where you don't feel a sense of comfort. And then you might feel really, really guilty or feeling like people are judging you while you're eating it. So you want to remove all of those factors that might create this sense of a lack of safety. So let's say lunchtime is a perfect opportunity because you're at home, maybe you work from home, or maybe you're at work, but you eat in your office. So it's just you and your food. And then I want you to visualize what it's going to look like to eat it. So before you even do, think about, close your eyes and imagine yourself, really like create a mental picture in your mind. I'm closing my eyes right now for this. So if I had this filmed, you would be able to see it. So close your eyes and just imagine, okay, I'm plating the sandwich. So I definitely recommend that you plate your food. Either you put it in a bowl if it's pasta, or you put it on a plate and you plate your sandwich. You eat it sitting down. Again, like you kind of want to make an event out of it. I very rarely stand and pick up my food because this reinforces mindless eating behaviors, which creates less of a satisfaction and enjoyment experience around food. So if you can, plate it, sit down, and then just imagine yourself eating it really mindfully. Like you're slowing down, you're either putting your fork down between each bite, or you're putting the sandwich down between each bite, and you're paying attention to the flavor, the texture, the temperature. I share a tool, I guess you could call, with my FFA members called the Describe It To Me method, where pretend that I'm sitting next to you and I've never eaten this food before, and you have to describe all of the different aspects and the flavors and the textures and what it really tastes like to me. So you're really paying attention to the food that's in front of you. You're experiencing gratitude for even having access to this food. food. We've gotten so used to you go to the corner, you grab food at the grocery store, and we don't remember like what went into creating this meal, the people who went into it, the hard work, the effort that went into it. So there's so much research that shows that just experiencing gratitude for your food increases your satisfaction, reduces a sense of guilt. As you're eating it, tune into how your body is responding. How hungry are you before you start eating? And then do some mid-meal check-ins. How hungry are you now? If you continue to eat, are you going to feel overly full? You're going to feel uncomfortable. Do your bites still taste as good as when you first started eating? Because there's the law of diminishing return. The longer you're eating a food, it starts to taste less and less good. And that's your body actually communicating with you that we're starting to get full, like we're good, we're satisfied. So pay attention to that. And then when you do get that signal from your body that, okay, I'm good, I've had enough, remind yourself, this is really important. So listen to this. Remind yourself that you're going to have this food again, that this isn't the only time that you can have a sandwich, that if you want to have another sandwich tomorrow at lunch, if you want to have another sandwich tonight at dinner, you can, because you want to give yourself unconditional permission to eat again. You want to rebuild that trust with your mind and with your body to remind it that the restriction is over. You want to remind it that you don't have to eat as much as you possibly can, even beyond fullness, because you don't know when's the next time you're going to eat it again. That's how that Last Supper mentality can trigger overeating or binge eating. Of course, if someone tells me that this is the last time that I can ever have cookies, I'm going to eat the entire box because I'm going to want to remember the delicious taste of cookies. Like, that's just natural human nature. So you want to remind yourself that you can have this food again and actually do have that food again. This is important. It's not like a one and done type of thing. Once you started working on one food, I recommend that you eat that food multiple times. It might take a week, it might take a few weeks for you to get to a point where you've really neutralized your emotional charge, your fear, your guilt around this food. And once you get to that point, then let's work on the next one. Maybe pasta is going to be next, but you want to do it in a way that feels non-overwhelming for you. You don't want to go into that panic mode. What you're really doing when, let's say, you're eating the sandwich, you're doing it mindfully, you're noticing that you stopped when you were full. You actually didn't feel bad physically. Like, you didn't feel bloated. You didn't feel sick. What you're doing is you're giving evidence to your brain that, oh, okay, I can trust myself around this food. I can eat this food without overeating, and it doesn't make me feel like crap. Maybe it's not as bad as people say that it is, because obviously I don't have to tell you that it's not. It's usually the overeating and the loss of control and the lack of mindfulness that makes you believe that this food is bad and that you shouldn't be eating it. And the last thing that I want to say on this is, let's say you do overeat the first time, the second time, the third time. It might happen. And this is part of the learning curve. It's actually part of the process. It's very likely that it does happen. And if it does, you haven't done anything wrong. Please don't make it mean that, see, I can't control myself around these foods. You want to look at it as a learning moment. You want to look at it as a lesson. So asking yourself some questions like, what can I learn from this? If I did overeat, what may have triggered that? What may have contributed to it? So things like, oh, maybe I was just like way too hungry before I started eating. I was starving, so I ate it really quickly. And then even when I started to get full, I just kept eating. It could have been I was really distracted, so I didn't pay attention to my body's cues when I got the signal that I was full. There's always lessons in it. And I actually just created a training inside FFA 2.0. The biggest problem that keeps women stuck in this cycle of repeating the same patterns over and over again, overeating, guilt, restricting, whatever that might be. It can be in all areas of your life. The biggest mistake people make is that they blame themselves instead of objectively looking at what is there for me to learn here. And once you start taking on that perspective, everything in your life is going to change. And you will break patterns. You will experience more growth. You will have trust in yourself. You will see challenges as a blessing. It truly is so freeing. And I can say that I've experienced the most growth from my challenges, from my failures and my mistakes, because I asked myself, what is there for me to learn here? So there you have it. That is my take on how to eat once you stop dieting and restricting. So really looking at how can I do this progressively, systematically, starting with one thing, bringing it into your life, creating trust with yourself, with that food, building up that evidence that, okay, maybe this food is not that bad and I actually can eat it without overeating. And then once you've neutralized that food, then you can move on to the next one. So thank you so much for listening. I would love for you to head over to Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health. If you don't follow me already, definitely hit follow because I'm always sharing some tips, some advice, some resources over on my Instagram. And send me a DM to let me know that you heard this episode and what is going to be the first food that you start with. Believe it or not, I love to hear about your journey and what you're learning from the podcast. What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? And I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.